you probably say it without thinking. I own Bitcoin. The words roll off the tongue easily, almost casually, like saying you own a phone, a car, or a house. But if we slow down for just a moment and really examine that sentence, something uncomfortable begins to surface. What does it actually mean to own Bitcoin? What exactly is it that you believe belongs to you? It's not a coin you can hold in your hand. It's not a file saved on your laptop. It's not even an object sitting somewhere in the digital cloud with your name on it. What you see is a number on a screen, a balance, a line of text inside an app, an exchange account, or a wallet interface. And somewhere deep inside, your brain fills in the rest. It tells you, this is mine. But Bitcoin doesn't care what your brain tells you. Bitcoin only responds to one thing: control. For most people, ownership has always been a feeling rather than a reality. If the bank app shows your balance, you feel wealthy. If the stock account shows shares under your name, you feel invested. If the platform lets you log in, you feel in control. And as long as everything works smoothly, no one questions it. Why would they? The illusion is comfortable. Bitcoin is the first asset that brutally exposes this illusion. When you own Bitcoin on an exchange, what you really have is a promise. A promise that the platform will let you access it. A promise that withdrawals will remain open. A promise that your account won't be frozen, restricted, flagged, or quietly disabled. And most of the time, that promise holds. Until it doesn't. History has shown, again and again, that access is not ownership. Access can be revoked. Access can be delayed. Access can disappear overnight with a carefully worded announcement or a silent system outage. When Bitcoin sits on a platform you do not control, your relationship with it looks suspiciously similar to your relationship within a bank. You are not the owner. You are a claimant. And claims only matter as long as the system honoring them remains intact. This is where Bitcoin begins to feel unsettling. It refuses to play along with our old definitions. It asks a question we are not used to answering. Who actually holds the power here? Is it the person looking at the balance or the entity that controls the keys behind the scenes? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If you cannot move your Bitcoin whenever you want, without asking permission, without waiting for approval, without worrying about business hours or compliance reviews, then you do not own it. You are merely allowed to look at it. This is not a philosophical argument. It's a technical one, and Bitcoin is ruthlessly literal. Ownership in Bitcoin is not declared. It is proven. Proven every time a transaction is signed, broadcast, and confirmed. No signature, no authority, no key, no control. Yet most people never see this layer. They are insulated by interfaces designed to feel familiar. Buttons that say buy and sell. Charts that move like stock markets. Notifications that mimic banking apps. The experience feels modern, safe, and reassuring. And that's precisely the point. The more Bitcoin feels like the old system, the less threatening it seems, but the more dangerous the misunderstanding becomes. Because Bitcoin was never designed to be familiar. It was designed to remove trust from the equation entirely. No bank, no intermediary, no company holding assets on your behalf. Just you and the network. That design is not a marketing slogan. It is the core of the invention. When Bitcoin is held for you, it stops being Bitcoin in its pure form. It becomes a representation, an IOU, a number backed by trust rather than math. And the moment trust re-enters the picture, all the old risks come rushing back in. This is why people are shocked when withdrawals are halted, why outrage erupts when accounts are frozen, why disbelief spreads when platforms collapse. The shock doesn't come from loss alone. It comes from the sudden realization that ownership was assumed, not guaranteed. Bitcoin does not reward assumptions. If you grew up in a world where ownership was abstract, managed by institutions, and enforced by authority, this feels unfair. Why should you need to think about keys, control, or responsibility? Why can't someone just take care of it for you? Bitcoin's answer is cold and simple. Because the moment someone else takes care of it, it is no longer truly yours. This is the line most people haven't crossed yet. They say they own Bitcoin, but what they really mean is that they have exposure to its price. They participate in its upside. They track it, trade it, speculate on it. But ownership, real ownership, remains something else entirely. And here is the quiet, unsettling thought that lingers beneath it all. If tomorrow you woke up and discovered that you could not move your Bitcoin, not because you made a mistake, but because someone else decided you couldn't, what would that say about your ownership yesterday? Bitcoin doesn't shout this question. It waits patiently until the moment you try to act. And in that moment, the illusion either holds or it shatters. There is a sentence in the Bitcoin world that sounds simple, almost boring, until the day it suddenly isn't. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Most people hear it, nod politely, and move on. It feels technical, maybe even elitist, something meant for developers, not everyday users. But that sentence is not about technology at all. It's about power. And more importantly, it's about where power actually lives. A private key is not just a password. It's not a recovery phrase you store somewhere and hope you never have to use. A private key is the only thing that gives you the right to speak to the Bitcoin network and be taken seriously. Without it, you are invisible. Your opinions don't matter. Your balance doesn't matter. Your sense of ownership doesn't matter. Bitcoin doesn't know your name. It doesn't recognize your account. It doesn't care about your screenshots. It only listens to cryptographic proof. That proof is your private key. When someone else holds it for you, what they really hold is your authority. They are the ones who can move the Bitcoin. They are the ones who can decide when, how, or if a transaction happens. You may feel like the owner, but in reality, you are a guest inside someone else's system. So why do so many people willingly give that up? Because convenience is seductive. Because responsibility is heavy. Because true control comes with the possibility of irreversible mistakes. And most humans are trained from birth to avoid that kind of risk. We are taught that someone else knows better, that institutions are safer, that systems are there to protect us from ourselves. Bitcoin disrupts this narrative in a deeply uncomfortable way. It says, you can be your own bank. But it doesn't say, and it will be easy. When you hold your own private keys, there is no customer support line, no password reset email, no appeals department. If you lose access, it's gone. Not temporarily, not until verification. Gone forever. This reality scares people, and understandably so. The fear is not irrational, it's human. But what's rarely discussed is the trade being made on the other side of that fear. When you hand over your private keys, you are not eliminating risk, you are transferring it. You are betting that the entity holding them will always act in your best interest, remain solvent, resist external pressure, and survive every crisis intact. You are betting on people, policies, and promises. Bitcoin was created precisely because those bets kept failing. Think of it this way. Giving your Bitcoin to an exchange for safekeeping is like giving your house keys to a stranger because they have a bigger lock and better insurance. As long as everything goes well, it feels smart, professional even. But the moment you want to walk in at midnight and discover the door won't open, you realize something crucial. You were never in control of your own home. The private key draws a clear, unforgiving line. On one side is sovereignty, on the other is permission. And most people live comfortably on the permission side without realizing it, because nothing has forced them to cross yet, until something does. A frozen withdrawal. A delayed transaction. A temporary restriction that quietly becomes permanent. In those moments, the philosophical becomes painfully practical. Bitcoin doesn't care how much you trusted the system. It doesn't care how reputable the platform was. It doesn't care how long you've been a loyal user. The network remains neutral, unmoved, and silent. The only thing that matters is who can produce a valid signature. This is why Bitcoin feels so unforgiving compared to traditional finance. There is no safety net built on authority. Only math, only rules, only consequences. And this leads to a deeper question most people avoid. Do we actually want financial freedom, or do we just want financial comfort? Freedom demands responsibility. It demands attention. It demands the courage to hold your own keys and accept the weight that comes with them. Comfort, on the other hand, asks for very little. Just trust, just compliance, just patience. Bitcoin offers both paths. It doesn't force you to choose sovereignty. It allows you to choose convenience. But it does not pretend they are the same thing. This is where the illusion quietly collapses. If your Bitcoin can be taken from you without your consent, then it was never truly yours. If your access depends on approval, then your ownership is conditional. And conditional ownership is not ownership at all. Many people say they believe in Bitcoin, But what they really believe in is number go up. They are not interested in keys, control, or responsibility. They want exposure, not sovereignty. And that's a valid choice, as long as it's an honest one. The danger lies in confusing exposure with ownership. Bitcoin does not punish ignorance immediately. It waits. It allows the illusion to exist for years if necessary. But the moment the system is tested, the truth emerges with brutal clarity. The private key is not a technical detail. It is the boundary between self-sovereignty and dependency, between autonomy and permission, between truly owning Bitcoin and merely borrowing the idea of ownership. And once you see that boundary clearly, you can never unsee it. By the time most people reach this point, they think the hardest part is already behind them. They understand private keys. They understand self-custody. They understand that real ownership means control. But this is where Bitcoin becomes even more uncomfortable, because technical understanding is only the surface layer. Beneath it lies something far more demanding. Owning Bitcoin is not just a technical decision, it is a philosophical one. Bitcoin does not simply ask you to store your keys safely. It asks you to accept a world without guardians, a world without exceptions, a world where there is no authority to call when something goes wrong. And for people raised inside systems designed around protection and intervention, this feels almost cruel. Traditional finance is built on the idea that someone is always in charge. Someone can reverse a mistake. Someone can freeze a transaction. Someone can step in when things go wrong. This creates a sense of moral comfort. Even when the system fails, we believe there is at least a place to complain. Bitcoin removes that illusion completely. The network does not care if you sent funds to the wrong address. It does not care if you were tricked, rushed, or confused. It does not care if the amount was small or life-changing. Once a transaction is confirmed, it becomes history, immutable, final, untouchable. This is not a flaw. It is the feature most people are quietly afraid of, because immutability forces maturity. It demands that you slow down, that you verify, that you take responsibility not just for your wealth, but for your actions. Bitcoin does not infantilize its users. It treats everyone the same, regardless of experience, intention, or status. This is deeply unsettling in a world accustomed to safety rails. Owning Bitcoin means accepting that no one will save you from your own mistakes, but it also means no one can arbitrarily take what is yours. There is no higher authority with special privileges, no emergency override reserved for the powerful. The same rules apply to everyone. This is why Bitcoin feels less like a financial product and more like a mirror. It reflects your values back at you. If you crave certainty provided by institutions, Bitcoin will feel harsh. If you value autonomy above comfort, it will feel honest. Most people say they want decentralization, but what they often mean is efficiency without accountability. They want a system that works better than banks, but still behaves like one when things go wrong. Bitcoin refuses to make that compromise. There are no human judges inside the protocol, no moral interpretations, no context, only rules executed consistently. To truly own Bitcoin, you must accept a world where fairness comes from predictability, not intervention, where equality comes from identical treatment, not compassion. And that is a difficult worldview to adopt. This is why many people never fully cross the line. They buy Bitcoin, but they don't internalize it. They treat it like a high-performance asset rather than a radical system. They hold it, but they don't live by its principles. They expect rescue where none exists. They expect forgiveness where none is programmed. They expect exceptions where only rules apply. And when reality clashes with expectation, disappointment follows. Bitcoin doesn't bend to human emotion. It doesn't care about your story. And paradoxically, that indifference is what makes it powerful. No one can manipulate it through influence, fear, or authority. No one can rewrite the rules mid-game. But this comes at a psychological cost. To own Bitcoin is to accept a level of personal responsibility that modern society has gradually trained us to avoid. It means understanding that freedom is not safety. Freedom is exposure. Exposure to your own competence, discipline, and judgment. Some people discover they don't actually want that. They want the narrative of freedom without the burden of it. They want the upside of sovereignty without the solitude. And Bitcoin makes no attempt to accommodate this contradiction. It simply exists. This is why the question, do you own Bitcoin, is incomplete. The deeper question is whether you accept the world Bitcoin represents, a world where trust is minimized, not rewarded, a world where systems don't care about who you are, only what you prove. Many people will never be comfortable here, and that's fine. Bitcoin doesn't demand belief. It doesn't recruit. It doesn't persuade. It waits. And for those who are willing to accept its worldview, ownership becomes something far more profound than holding an asset. It becomes an alignment between how you think, how you act, and how the system responds. Most people buy Bitcoin hoping it will change their future. Very few realize it first demands that they change themselves. That is the quiet threshold between having Bitcoin and truly owning it. At this point, the question begins to turn inward. After private keys, after responsibility, after accepting a system with no guardians, a quieter, more unsettling thought emerges. Do you really own Bitcoin, or has Bitcoin started to own you? Not in the sense of control over your funds, but in the way it shapes your behavior, your attention, your emotions. Many people believe ownership ends with self-custody, but that is only one layer. True ownership also means freedom from obsession, fear, and dependency, because it's entirely possible to hold your own keys and still be enslaved. If your mood rises and falls with the price, Bitcoin owns a part of you. If every market dip fills you with anxiety, Bitcoin has leverage over you. If every rally makes you reckless, Bitcoin is driving your decisions. This is the final illusion, and perhaps the hardest one to confront. There is a fundamental difference between someone who speculates on Bitcoin and someone who owns it. The speculator watches the chart, the owner watches the system. One is focused on price, the other is focused on principles. Speculation is reactive. Ownership is intentional. The speculator asks, what will Bitcoin do for me? The owner asks, what does Bitcoin allow me to do? This shift changes everything. When you truly own Bitcoin, you stop looking at it as a lottery ticket. You stop needing constant validation from the market. Volatility becomes noise, not identity. Price becomes information, not emotion. Bitcoin doesn't promise wealth. It promises independence. And independence is often boring, quiet, and deeply misunderstood. The irony is that many people come to Bitcoin seeking freedom from the system, only to build a new psychological cage around themselves. They trade one form of dependence for another. Instead of banks, they depend on price action. Instead of institutions, they depend on market sentiment. Bitcoin doesn't ask for this devotion. People bring it with them. True ownership means you can walk away from the screen, that you can hold Bitcoin without needing it to perform for you today, tomorrow, or next week. That you understand its long-term nature, not as a promise, but as a possibility. This is where patience becomes a form of sovereignty. In moments of financial stress, ownership reveals itself clearly. When systems restrict access, when trust evaporates, when liquidity disappears, that is when the difference between exposure and ownership becomes undeniable. Those who merely had access panic. Those who had control act. Bitcoin was not designed for comfort in calm times. It was designed for resilience in chaotic ones, and that resilience only benefits those who truly own it, both technically and psychologically. There is no applause for this kind of ownership, no daily excitement, no constant reassurance. It's quiet, almost invisible. And that's precisely why it works. You don't feel powerful holding Bitcoin. You feel responsible. And responsibility is not glamorous. Bitcoin does not care if you talk about it online. It does not care if you defend it in debates. It does not care if you call yourself a believer. It only responds when you act, when you sign, when you verify, when you take full responsibility for your choices. At that point, ownership becomes real, not because you declared it, but because no one can take it from you. So, do you really own Bitcoin? If you control the keys, you own the asset. If you accept the responsibility, you own the system. If you are not emotionally ruled by it, you own yourself. And that may be the most overlooked part of this entire conversation. Bitcoin does not free you automatically. It offers the tools. The rest is up to you. Whether you use those tools to build independence or simply construct a more sophisticated illusion depends entirely on how honest you are willing to be. In the end, Bitcoin makes no promises. It makes no guarantees. It simply asks a question over and over again, in every market cycle, in every crisis, in every moment of doubt. Are you willing to truly own it, or are you more comfortable being owned by the idea of it?